You may have heard the familiar phrases, mind over matter, the mind is a terrible thing to waste, and that scientists say we really only use about 10% of our brains. Well, if that's the case, if we learn to train our minds to employ more than that 10%, could the most complex organ in our bodies be a tool to help us improve our lives? My name is Kelsey McCall. I first became interested in learning more about the power of the mind after seeing a special on cable TV about Shaolin monks and other people with seemingly superhuman strengths and their ability to easily endure untold amounts of pain and discomfort that the average person would find unbearable. Like a man who trained his mind to regulate his body temperature to withstand simulated hypothermic conditions and then be perfectly fine afterward. Or the monk who never flinched while bricks and nails punished his body. It's not that I'm some type of sadist or anything, but the fact that we as humans are capable of pushing the limits of what we normally perceive as possible truly fascinates me. And then I started to think about people who seem to have the most reason to be mad at the world and be pessimistic, whether they're hungry or sick or living in third world countries without the luxuries we take for granted, and those who are victims of crime or whatever the circumstances. Whenever you hear their stories of survival, they usually always have one thing in common, and it's that they use their brain to always think positively and keep an optimistic outlook. And so when I delved into the topic of learning to unlock our mind's potential, I came across numerous books about how to use the power of the mind to do all types of things, from losing weight to getting rich to overcoming addiction. It's obvious all of us have areas in our lives we'd like to improve, and although it may seem counterintuitive, doing less instead of more may be the key. Now, by less, I don't mean simply vegging out in front of the TV or getting more sleep. In this piece, I'll be learning and sharing my own experiences about discovering why and how calming the mind by meditating is perceived by those in the know as the first step to living a more fulfilling, happy, and healthy life. Meditation is a centuries-old practice. Its origins are commonly associated with Eastern cultures and religions, but no one can say for sure where this form of spiritual, mental, and wellness tradition really began. From an historical and religious perspective, the meditative tradition is primarily viewed as a means of attaining divinity, becoming closer to God. Neoplatonism is the modern word used to describe the philosophy having great influence on Christianity in the 3rd century. Plotinus, an ancient Roman philosopher and founder of Neoplatonism, names 4 elements essential to obtaining godly wisdom. Among them, the development of thought beyond sense perception and the transcendence of thought in the achievement of union. Ignatius Loyola, founder of the Jesuits and author of Spiritual Exercises, describes various meditation techniques similar to Buddhist and Hindu practices. For example, picking a specific image, such as the resurrection, and relating each of the senses to that image. In Judaism, it is believed that meditation is required to truly understand the Torah, and that this meditation inspired works such as the Talmud. In the 13th century, Abraham Abulafia, a Jewish mystic and forefather of prophetic Kabbalism, created a method of meditation based on combining letters of the Hebrew alphabet in a manner designed to obtain prophecy by disengaging one's senses from the images and perceptions associated with everyday life. Sufism, an 8th century Islamic offshoot of strict Muslim orthodoxy, stressed the importance of meditation, employing techniques such as breath control and repetition of sacred phrases in order to achieve fana, a closer bond with God. Although the practice of meditation is deeply rooted in religious tradition, today, especially in Western culture, meditation is simply a vehicle to promote overall health, productivity, and positive social change. Of the numerous meditation techniques in practice today, one of the most popular forms in the West and highly researched worldwide is transcendental meditation, brought to the U.S. from India in the late 1950s by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi.
On average, a person has between 14 and 15,000 thoughts a day. And if you multiply that out over a week, a month, a year, it just becomes an incredible amount of thoughts coming into our mind all the time. The amount of thoughts we have would kind of postulate then that something that's giving rise to these thoughts must be pretty huge itself. And some characteristics of thought are that it has intelligence and it has energy. Every time we have a thought, it has some intelligence because it guides our activity. We make plans based on our thinking. Every thought has energy and intelligence. Therefore, the thing that's giving rise to these thoughts must also contain energy and intelligence. And similarly, since there's so many of these things that pop into our mind, it must be an infinite reservoir of intelligence and energy deep within our mind that's giving rise to thoughts all the time. And what we do in transcendental meditation is we allow our active conscious mind to move from these superficial, I say superficial, but active thinking level to sequentially deeper, more settled, quieter levels of thinking until the mind transcends. The word transcend means to go beyond, and meditation in the broadest sense means thinking. So transcendental meditation is about going beyond thought. And when the mind transcends, it experiences that source that's giving rise to impulses of thought, this infinite reservoir of energy and intelligence deep within the mind. So when the mind makes contact with this, it enlivens it. It enlivens it in our mind and in our body. Like a sponge sitting in a saucer of water absorbs the water into the sponge. In meditation, we dive within, we allow the mind to experience these more subtle states of functioning, more deeper levels of consciousness, so that it can understand how it functions and how life functions as a whole.
Diving deep within. The key phrase here with regard to meditation and primary goal of the practice. Whether we consider ourselves religious or spiritual or not, we all want and need peace of mind. Escape from the rigors and stress of everyday life. According to statistics from the American Psychological Association, 1/3 of Americans live with extreme stress. Almost half say their stress has risen over the past few years, and that stress has a negative impact on them at home and at work. From our interpersonal relationships to our health, chronic stress is a major problem. Recent studies suggest that most illnesses are stress-related. Stress triggers an alarm in the brain, telling the body to prepare to defend itself. The nervous system springs into action and various hormones are released so that the senses are sharpened, the heart beats faster, breathing is deeper, and muscles are more tense. Although this fight or flight response is innate, when the body is kept in a constant state of alert because the stress is ever present, that daily grind on our biological systems takes its toll, resulting in fatigue and the breakdown of our immune systems, and thus our overall health. Dr. Serena Groswald has studied extensively the effects of regular meditation on children diagnosed with ADHD. She describes the role stress plays in negatively influencing their behavior.
The prefrontal cortex, which is that part of the brain that is sort of our filter that keeps us from acting from the more primitive part of the brain, which is the emotional part of the brain, that reaction. The prefrontal cortex filters that, and it's analysis and planning, and so that part of the brain that says, you know, maybe I shouldn't hit this person just because they said something I didn't like, that's not functioning because stress shuts down that part of the brain. It's nature's way of protecting us. When we're under extreme stress, we don't want to be analyzing things. We want to get out of the situation or stand and defend ourselves, whatever it is. But chronic stress shuts that down chronically.
Suffice it to say, when we live in a constant state of stress, we're simply not at our best. Stress diminishes our capacity to function at our optimal level, thus adversely affecting every facet of our lives and the ability to enjoy life more fully. And this is where the power of our minds comes into play. And it's not just some abstract theory.
National Institutes of Health has funded over $27 million in research funding for TM, particularly in the areas of cardiovascular disease. And they've done research on the health benefits of TM comparing to non-meditators. One of the most outstanding studies, I think, is when it compared 2,000 subjects, Blue Cross Blue Shield participants, and they compared those that do transcendental meditation to those that didn't. And they looked at 17 disease categories, and over 16 of those 17 disease categories, there were statistically significant reductions in healthcare utilization, fewer visits to the doctor, fewer need for hospitalization, shorter stays in hospitalization. And in some areas they saw a decrease as much as 87%, particularly in the area of cardiovascular disease. So you can see in terms of health benefits how significant that can be in reducing healthcare costs and keeping us healthy, in prevention, because 70 to 90% of disease is stress related. It's either caused by or made worse by stress. And so if we can prevent that stress, we can prevent significant disease. And so the benefits are both for the mind and the body, and really creates a state of well-being.
I vehemently want to express the fact that I'm not advocating any one particular form of meditation over another. There are many methods and each has its devout practitioners. If interested in learning, I'd advise you to research and find out which is best for you. However, to present date, TM is the most researched and funded, and therefore provides the most documented scientific research indicating the significant health benefits of those who practice. But facts and figures aside, I found that meditation attracts people from all walks of life, each with their own story about what piqued their interest to learn or teach the practice. So what is it drawing more and more people in our Western culture to tune out the world and tune into themselves?
My mother taught me to meditate when I was a teenager, and that kind of started everything in keeping in sync with what I do. Don't do drugs very well, so I had to start learning about holistic remedies. Holistic practice has become a lot more popular in mainstream. Acupuncture, a lot more Eastern traditions are now coming over here, and I think a lot of it is people aren't happy with how their care is going. We're very disease focused and we're not very wellness focused, and more people are becoming more wellness focused. We want to stay healthy, we want to live longer. We'd rather not spend money on drugs and be stuck taking the drugs for longer periods of time.
And although she's only been in business for a short time, Dr. Kelly's steady stream of clientele continues to grow.
What I do here is a lot of hypnotherapy, which is just another term for guided meditation, teaching people to get over their fears, their stresses, learning how to get all that negative chatter that goes on in the back of our minds calm down and get that negative voice to shut up so that we can start doing some positive reinforcement. It's usually one-on-one training, so it's relaxation training. I try not to use meditation because a lot of people, oh, that's prayer, or, and I'm non-denominational for people in here, so they come in, doesn't matter. We're working on relaxation and guided meditation, teaching them so that they can do it themselves. There are a lot more people interested in it lately. When I was a teenager, people would ask about meditating and they would still consider it kind of occult or esoteric, and it's not. I mean, there are practices that they can use it for that, but in day-to-day, everyday life,
Well, I started back in 1980. I'd actually seen somebody meditate. It wasn't very popular at that time, and said, "What is that? What is that all about?" And they said, "It's meditation." And I went to the library actually and looked up a bunch of books. A lot of them were had to do with the mystique of meditation, and a lot of it was in foreign countries, Indian, gurus and that type of thing. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said, "Well, here's a book about transcendental meditation, which is an American author, and it talks about the scientific studies and scientific research that's been done on it." And being an engineer, that kind of appealed to me. Read it from cover to cover and enjoyed it, and just called out of the phone book and went to the TM Center in Pikesville, Maryland, and basically talked to the person there, and became more and more intrigued. And he said, "Why don't you start?" When I started meditation in 1980, I felt self-conscious. I didn't even want some of my associates and friends and so on to know that I meditated because it seemed too spooky, but things have changed. I think the more people meditate, the more influence they have on their environment. And that as the environment gets softer, I think people are more accepting. And I hear myself as an engineer saying this, and kind of with a scientific way I was brought up was to more like, well, you should be able to demonstrate and prove stuff. But if you have the experience yourself, that's better almost than proving something, because that's more than a substitute, it's the real thing.
I became first introduced to meditation, transcendental meditation, in 1971. The Maharishi came to Massachusetts, came to Amherst, Massachusetts, and spoke at University of Massachusetts, and a lot of my friends went to hear him speak. And he was very influential, and we all became excited about what his message was, which is he was telling us about a very simple way to meditate and reach a peaceful place that would be very restful. But I was too young to understand. I mean, not that people my age weren't meditating. People were meditating, but for me it was very difficult. I couldn't sit still. I didn't understand what they were saying. I didn't hear the message. So I gave it up probably after a year of trying. Then when I was interviewing for my job at the tower companies, I found out that not only did one of the owners meditate, but the whole family had been exposed, and most of them are meditating, and the company in general is meditating. My new phase of meditating began in December of 2007. Now, what attracted me to meditating is the fact that it is a very restful process, and I'm extremely active. Not only do I have a demanding profession, but I also am a mother of 2 kids, and I am very athletically inclined. So I get tired easily, and I'm old, so I get tired easily, and I assumed that this would help me concentrate at work and give me a form of relaxation that would be better than napping. Before I meditated, that's what I would try to fit in, a nap every day. And you can't nap if you're practicing law every day.
My name is Albert Zoima. I'm from Haiti. I love philosophy, art, martial arts, and really into as far as like the body, the mind, how everything operates and works. I started into meditation. I took a class a couple years ago into philosophy, and we had talked about philosophers and scientists also, and one of them that really struck me was the Buddha. So his philosophy I really like, as far as like the mind of people, and how it works and what we are, and that's how I got into it. Even though it took me a couple years to realize that was something that I really wanted to dig into, but I had little distractions. And in some way, somehow, I got back into it.
I learned TM not because I was looking for something or even knew very much about it. I came to it because my older brother learned. And he learned because he was in graduate school in psychology, and he went to an introductory lecture, and he just thought what he heard there sounded so appealing that he decided to learn. And after a few months, he was having really wonderful experiences, and he suggested that I learn, and I thought my older brother knew everything, and so I did. And then over time, just really having, for myself, realizing the benefits, and then being very much drawn to it as more research came out, drawn to studying it myself. I think meditation has become of interest in the West because we live in such a stressed society. World Health Organization has actually said that we have an epidemic of stress. And finally people are saying life has just become too overwhelming, and they're looking for ways to manage their stress. And I think they're also looking for some inner fulfillment. We have gained more and more material things, and people have become wealthier, and they seek out and get the material things that they want and find that somehow there's something still missing. And I think that's also something that's become very important in society today. We see more and more people turning towards spiritual kinds of things, seeking that inner stability.
Inner stability and inner peace. Many people who quote-unquote live the life, be it with money, fame, or material things, don't necessarily have happiness or inner peace. Buddhist monks and other spiritual beings inspire me because of their dedication and success in living an extremely disciplined and simple life, which they say brings them happiness, peace, and ultimately closer to the goal of enlightenment. This lifestyle is achieved primarily through meditation as the vehicle. I wanted to tap into that vibe and find out what their secret is.
The practical Buddhism, they call Dana, Sila, Bhavana. These are 3 important things in the Buddhist practitioners. Dana is practicing generosity, Sila is a moral conducting, mental, physical and verbal behavior, and bhavana is a meditation. Meditation mean and something have to work on our weakness, you know. Meditation is a development, develop your insight, and our mind and our insight is underdeveloped. That's why we have sorrow, pain, lamentation, all difficulties, all kind of problems, jealous, anger, all kind of things, because we are not enlightened. We are not developed our insight, our third eye. So that's why all the things, attachment, all problems and our misbehavior, all kind of problems, as a result, very difficult situation. So meditation trying to calming down your insight. Morning to evening, so many things happening our day. If we don't meditate, our mind is like a monkey mind, you know, so many things on it. When we have our mind all kind of problems and difficulties, our words are not really good. So someone who having the good disciplined mind, the meditation can bring the happiness and the strong concentration. To do that, we need the meditation. We have to sit down, we have to look at ourselves. No need to be a Buddhist. Any person can be the practice Buddhist teaching. Any person can practice meditation.
And if anyone can practice meditation, then there must be techniques that appeal to all types of people. All methods share the key principle of shutting out the outside world and reconnecting with ourselves. However, there are distinctions to be made amongst various forms. There are dozens of specific meditation techniques, from guided relaxation to transcendental to yoga to Buddhist meditation and so forth. While researching, I found that when it comes to the categorization of these techniques, depending on the source consulted, a few semantics issues tend to arise, but generally, there are two main forms: concentration and contemplation, also referred to as mindfulness meditation. Concentration techniques develop one's ability to concentrate by devoting all attention to a sole object, be it the breath, a candle, sounds and mantras, or certain movement patterns. Originating from traditional Buddhist meditation practices, with mindfulness or contemplative meditation, practitioners make a special effort to acknowledge all feelings, thoughts, and sensations while meditating, and to think about why they are there without resisting them. Once a meditator learns to calm the mind, the practice is enhanced, thus producing a clearer understanding of life and self, and the ability to be more in tune with the present moment. Most specific meditation techniques are a hybrid of these two categories.
Remember to allow your breath to lead your body.
There's not necessarily one meditation that works for all people. It's primarily about going inward. When you're in a yoga class, even though there are other people in the class, you are doing your own yoga practice on your mat. The basic idea that people have about meditation, where you're just sitting with your eyes closed and being very, very still, although that sounds good to some people and they like the peace and the stillness and the quiet, other people might have difficulty being still or quieting their mind. And the more they try to do that, the busier their mind gets and the more nervous they get. So things like walking meditation, yoga, even gardening can be a meditation where you're just turning inward and allowing your mind to become clear and reaching a place within yourself that is peaceful and that you can hear your own intuition and inner thoughts and perhaps guidance from your spiritual source.
Different meditations are different. They work differently, they have different effects on the mind and body. Transcendental meditation is unique in the state that it creates in the brain, that restful alertness that creates that level of brain integration or brain coherence. Many other techniques fall into one of two categories. They're either techniques of concentration, where you're forcing or controlling the mind to do something. And that's often what people are doing when they come in, they're interested in meditation, but they say, I tried, but I just can't do it. It's generally because they're trying some kind of concentration technique and they're trying to force the mind to be clear or be empty. And that's the exact opposite of TM. It doesn't require that effort or concentration. And then other forms of meditation are meditations of contemplation, where you're many different kinds that fall into that category. Sometimes they say imagine yourself walking on the beach, or observe your thoughts and your actions. All of that engages the mind. It keeps the mind active, where TM allows the mind to go inward towards the more and more quiet states of our own awareness till we actually can experience complete silence, that pure consciousness of our own awareness when the mind is not active.
We call all that meditation called samatha vipassana. Vipassana is practicing impermanence and insight meditation, and samatha meditation is any object, like even the Buddhism, they call 40 topics to sit and meditate that can concentrate. But concentrate is not enough, but we are more than concerned, we have to develop the reality to look at it. That's why insight meditation is more than concentrate. Transcendental meditation, they use it like a mantra, there's a kind of special quote they're just reciting over and over. It is very helpful. It's very helpful to your lousy mind to calm down. And Vipassana meditation not only calm down, they're developing more than that. For the enlightenment, need the Vipassana meditation. That's both together. Both we need the concentrate and then the development. So all other meditation, transcendental and other kind of Mahayana meditation, or called Tantrayana, all kind of meditation, very helpful to concentrate your mind. But it is not the way. We need a little beyond that.
We're going to start with some Qigong, moving the energy in our bodies. First one we always start with is just raising our hands up as we're breathing.
Regardless of the technique employed, all of the meditators I spoke with conveyed the profound impact regular meditation has had on their lives, personifying the concept of unlocking our mind's potential by doing less, more often, to improve our lives.
Anything your mind can visualize, your body can achieve. Point in case, in 2005, I broke my shoulder in a motorcycle accident in 2 places. Snapped my collarbone in half and broke the scapula. My orthopedic surgeon said, you're not ever going to be able to use your arm to full capacity again. And put a screw in my shoulder and sent me to physical therapy. Here I hope physical therapy will help, but you're not going to regain full use of your shoulder. You don't tell me can't, because it's not part of my vocabulary. And I said, okay, that's fine. And I started working on meditating. Didn't take the painkillers. I think I took them for 2 days, didn't like the way they were making me feel. So instead worked with over-the-counter, regular Motrin, and just meditating and working through any of the pain, visualizing that I was going to be able to use my arm and doing it each and every day and making it so that I could. If you can see it in your mind, you can actually achieve it in body and then carry it over into your day. You see it with sports too. Athletes will visualize over and over in their mind in order to actually get their body to follow suit.
The goal of meditation really is just to see things as they are, just being more present and being more aware to the way things are anyway. So it's not necessarily something I think you have a distinct goal, or at least if you do have a goal, it's not something you need to keep in your mind. It's something, you have to do the process and the goals and the benefits come from that. But generally when I meditate, it's a clear feeling. I kind of shy away from the ideas that people should get ideas of what it's like, because everyone's, meditation experience is different, because everyone's mind and everyone's body is different. But when I end a meditation session for the next half an hour or so, I feel especially present to what I'm doing and especially kind of clear, like a nice spring day.
I noticed within a week, I noticed the difference. I was more mindful of the things around me. As I'm driving, I noticed that I go like 1 mile. As I'm driving 1 mile, I noticed that where did those minutes go when I was driving? It's like you're so oblivious to it. So, but when it comes to meditation and you realize those space that you just totally not aware of, you start noticing. You start to pick out things, you start to see things, be more into it, be in the moment. Most of the time, the way our mind works, our mind usually is in the future or in the past, but seems never to be in the present. I noticed that as I'm reading what I read before, I don't even remember it. But now, since I have meditated, I started meditation, I'm reading that book, I remember everything in that book. Meditation helps you do that. It increases your concentration, helps increase your focus. Spiritually, it's to better myself and to know what am I made of, what is this body made of, what is this mind made of. You have the body and then you have the mind, you're conscious. So there are two parts of it where you actually have to know and learn. There's no instructions as far as life or instruction for the mind. We all can be spiritually into religious into things, but there's no instructions for developing the mind. So meditation does that as far as me.
My life sort of just has fallen into place. I just feel like more confident in my day-to-day, more able to handle things that might be hard, more sure of what I want. Like I feel like I don't feel like I have any of the blinders on in life. I know myself better, so I don't feel like I have some of the barriers that get in the way of knowing what I want, whether it's people, relationships, or work, or just day-to-day experiences. Everything just feels a bit clearer. There's so much that gets in our way and so many distractions and so many things that make us lose touch with who we are, and it's like a struggle to get back to that sense of, okay, this is who I am and this is what I like. And for me, if that disconnect starts to happen a little bit, it comes back together really quickly. But I feel like this really keeps me grounded on day-to-day of just knowing who I am and feeling connected to myself and something greater than myself.
I was attracted to meditation too because I thought, well, maybe this is, something good and I can feel good about it and I'll feel good doing it and all that type of thing. But it isn't the vehicle itself that's really what's going on, because it changes you very subtly and very fundamentally, and in a sense makes you more normal. It kind of normalizes things that may be out of kilter a little bit in the way that you think about things and the way you perceive things and the way you perceive life. People talk about that it reduces stress. And stress is really maybe not interpreting what goes on in your life as it should be or as a healthy way of interpreting things. It gives you kind of an anchor that allows you to have a certain peace of mind, even though there's a lot going on around you. You might think, well, if you're more blissful, you'd be more calm, but actually you're more active, a lot of times more precise, more decisive, but not angry. The anger element seems to disappear, because anger is really a reflection of fear. Sense of well-being improves, and that's the type of change that happens. Now, it happens over time. It happens not gradually in a linear way. Sometimes it seems to go quickly and sometimes it's more slowly, but it just continues to, you continue to evolve as you continue to do the meditation a lot more quickly than you would evolve as just for having regular life experiences. During your active part of your life, some days, and it isn't every day, but some days, and a lot more often than before, you just feel like smiling more and being more understanding of what's going on and not being rattled by things that, in your perspective are going wrong, because there's a sense that you eventually get that nothing really ever goes wrong. It's just the way you're looking at it. I'm an engineer, so it really has to hit me hard before I really admit that something like that's going on. And I'm not a touchy-feely person by nature, but as you get in that softer mode and more receptive, well, you begin to realize that, yeah, there's things going on that are very nice, and maybe you could explain by saying that the meditation is responsible for. So I feel very good about that. I like classical music and certain kinds of jazz and that kind of thing. I can tell when somebody's laughing or smiling or having a funny experience when they've written something or playing something, or maybe that they're feeling a certain emotion like sadness or power. you can understand what it is that they're getting at, and it's just automatic. You just say, oh, I get it. All of a sudden I understand. You can do the same thing with art, and you can kind of say, well, you know where the person was when they were creating it, because you can kind of get into it and see that part of it. And when a person talks about philosophy, instead of there just being kind of weird words and I'm trying to understand it, it's like, oh, well, that's easy. I know what they're doing. It's because you're drawing from that same place for all of those experiences. When you are able to draw on this part of yourself that you're enlivening by meditating every day. When you enliven that, it just makes everything so rich.
The benefits were apparent immediately. I was less tired, noticeably less tired, and I'm very skeptical. I'm a cynical, skeptical, critical person by nature. And it was so clear to me that I was more rested, and that in and of itself was a huge benefit. The second was clarity of thought, and a lot of friends of mine laugh at me and say, oh, you don't really have any clearer thought, but I do. I can analyze situations easier, I focus better. Those are all difficult tasks for me. Staying focused, even though as an attorney I have to focus on documents and writing and talking to people. To stay focused and to really enjoy it while I'm doing it was not that easy for me. And after this procedure, it really does. I do feel much more focused, much more patient with my children, patient with my colleagues, patient with my adversaries, everyone.
At this point, I've been meditating for about 16 to 18 weeks now. After the first few days of struggling to establish a routine, I've actually started to look forward to it and can definitely notice a few differences within myself. I never realized before I was actually one of the numerous victims of stress and how much issues like work and relationships were taking a toll on me, to the extent that in retrospect, I never took the time to acknowledge and tend to certain emotions I'd experience. That's changing now, and I'm also learning to keep things in perspective more when it comes to dealing with circumstances and people, trying to remember to live in the moment. I also feel much more energized emotionally and mentally, and can get to sleep a little bit faster at night sometimes. The subjective nature of each individual's experiences, including my own, could lead many to question the authenticity of such claims. However, recent scientific findings indicate actual changes in the brains of regular meditators, even in those with special challenges.
In my regular work as a consultant in medical education, I was working on a project related to ADHD, and I had to do research on the causes of it, the mechanisms of action, or how the drugs work. And I realized that there had been research done on TM showing that it affects the same neurotransmitters, the same chemicals in the brain that are affected by the drugs. And the drugs have such serious side effects. They were giving these drugs to children, and I thought, we need to be looking at whether TM can really make a difference for these children. And what we saw, this was what was, I think, the most dramatic thing for me, and I started to think about this problem in a very different way, because ADHD is a problem with attention and focus and concentration. And what we saw in our research was a 50% or more reduction in stress and stress-related problems. These children, they were meditating 10 minutes twice a day, every day in school. And after 3 months, they were showing improvements in their behavior management, improvements in their attention and focus. They felt different. They described feeling different. And when we looked at the data, when we saw this dramatic reduction in stress, we could see the connection here between the disorder and the problems that they were having. And then we followed that research the next year, looking at doing EEG measurements, looking at actual changes in the brain, since this is a disorder of the brain. And so we did EEG measurements. We had a control group and an experimental group. So we had a group that did not learn TM and a group that did learn TM. And we looked at their functioning, their brain functioning, while doing a fairly difficult visual motor task. Measured their EEG before they learned TM, and then 3 months later. And then we compared the improvements of the control group and the TM group. After 3 months, how much improvement was seen in each of the groups? The control group had some very small minor improvements, but the TM group had very dramatic increases in brain development, or in the amount of the brain that they were using while doing this task. And so they were using more of their brain, more global EEG functioning, as we say. And so that also helps explain why we were seeing the improvements in attention and focus and behavior management. We're beginning to use the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that is attention and focus and planning and strategizing. And so we now had a more objective measure of the changes that we were seeing. What happens is that more of the brain fires together. And so we think about somebody who's a visionary, for example, that they're using a certain part of their brain, and somebody who's a detail person is using a certain part of the brain, or somebody who's creative is using a certain part of the brain, and somebody who's analytical is using a different part of the brain. But the ideal is to have all of the brain functioning so that when you're doing something, you're drawing from the left and right hemisphere, the prefrontal cortex, the rear of the brain, all of those things, and it's so that you can really spontaneously see the big picture, see the details, and that's what happens with TM.
Can we meditate our way to a more patient, gentler, and caring self? That seems to be the consensus after researchers studied the effects of meditation on Buddhist monks by employing the use of auditory stimulation and functional magnetic resonance imaging to gauge response. This brain scanning technology indicated that, compared to novices, monks with at least 10,000 hours of meditation time practiced displayed substantial activity in the insular cortex as well as the amygdala, areas of the brain primarily associated with emotion. So what does this mean? According to the researchers, it means people may have more power over their personalities than they think. Various reports touting the benefits of meditation have certainly inspired efforts to mainstream the practice outside of the home as well. As part of a stress reduction program, Dr. Rutherford has now helped implement TM in his second school in the nation's capital.
14 years ago, I had the opportunity to see TM in Fairfield, and I saw how little and big children seemed to be enjoying themselves. And I thought it was something that I needed for my students. And I brought it back to Washington, D.C., and we started our TM program at the Fletcher Johnson Educational Center, and it was very successful. My students were carrying a lot of stress, and when you carry stress, a lot of things happen. Fights would break out, you're not focused in on what you're supposed to be doing academically. So we brought the TM program to Fletcher Johnson. We reduced the tension in the halls. We had students to focus better. Our behavior problem went down. Our attendance went up. And I was asked to come to run this school. And it was not until 2 years ago we had the David Lynch Foundation, along with the Averson Foundation, who provided us with the money to train all of our students and all of our teachers in transcendental meditation.
And even though the concept of meditating evokes a religious context to some, Dr. Rutherford maintains that fact was no obstacle.
Parents are really more concerned with their students getting a quality education and that they are healthy. We're not hiding transcendental meditation, what we're doing here. It's open, and when a parent registers for the school, we tell them what we're doing. It's all about education and about, I always say, saving children.
Tower Companies, the largest green developer in the Washington, D.C. area, is not only committed to sustaining the environment, but to improving the quality of life for employees as well.
We decided to introduce the Transcendental Meditation program in our business because we realized that there was no connection between providing health care and staying healthy. And in business, we do not seem to really invest in our people. We pay the salaries and we expect them to be working at 100% of life. But that's not the way life is. There are more than a third of Americans have some kind of heart disease. About 50% are mood-elevating drugs. This is not a country that can be competitive and expand and alert. The same thing comes down to our employees. The basis of any company is its employees. They're the face of the company. They're the future of the company. It's their ideas that get implemented. And unless you invest in those people to keep them alert, productive, creative, and give them the tools for themselves self-sufficiently, not a coach, not somebody who's trying to inspire them, something that they can do simply 20 minutes twice a day, then you will have a very successful workforce, and that's what we discovered. We started the Transcendental Meditation technique about 15 years ago here, and we have about 65–70% of the people who practice Transcendental Meditation on a regular basis. There's one employee said to me, "Jeffrey, you've given me something that I can do for myself. My whole life is based on helping our employees, helping my children, helping my husband. Everything is for everyone else, but you've given me a tool to help myself."
All right, so is there any kind of special way I have to sit?
Whatever makes you most comfortable. Some people...
Okay, so by now you're probably wondering, how does one actually meditate? What's the whole process like? Is it easy to integrate into an everyday routine? Of course, each person's experience will be unique, but seemingly, with a bit of patience and consistency, you may find making time to meditate a priority in your life.
My mother and I went through a lot of different guided meditations when we listened to the CDs, or they'd walk you through it, and they'd put you in a magical forest, or they'd take you on an imaginary journey. As an adult, I tend to focus only on my breathing. When you're focused on meditative breathing, I try to get them to focus on filling their lower lungs first, then their middle, and then their upper. And that's kind of a reverse pattern from how we're taught, or how we naturally tend to breathe. So you really have to focus on it. So flat feet, hands wherever. The goal is just to get comfortable. And all we do is finding a comfortable spot and allowing your eyes to close. And just taking that deep breath in, so filling the lungs from the lower portion. Taking another deep breath in and up, out and down. And imagining a warm white light just above your head. Allowing all the tension and tightness to drain away. Open your eyes.
Feels like
everything came down a notch.
Yeah. Good way to articulate it. I couldn't articulate it.
Everything comes down a notch. That's 5 minutes. And you can do that on your own. That's what I teach them.
When I sit with the people to meditate, I'm advising to them not to worry about what happened to the past, not to worry about what not come to yet. And as a meditator, sit this very moment, this present moment, not to worry your mistake or you forgot to make the bill payment or something, not to worry about when you sit in the cushion. They're trying to keep completely away from the other side of the worldly type of all kind of things. They keep away. When you do it over and over, many times, it making the pattern. So one day you cannot enlighten. No, it's not instant result. It takes a little time. It's a gradual process. Since we are little, so many things we struggle with our things. We never calm and settle down. So now it is new thing to your system. Now you have to train. Untrained mind is so weird. That's why you have to train your mind to your focus, to your object. Someone who settled mind, calm mind, what's the result? Happiness, spiritual happiness.
The meditation that I practice is body meditation. Body meditation is into focus on the body, of its movement, the activities it goes through, and also focus on the mind, because of course the mind is what moves the body. Everybody was wondering, like, how do you meditate? It's easy, but the hardest part is keeping that focus, keeping that concentration. Your mouth should be shut and closed. Your tongue should be placed on your upper palate, and your eyes and focus should be pretty much closed. And the focus is that you gaze on the front tip of your nose, and you're breathing. And of course, the way you are breathing is normal, and don't force it. And the way the hand position should be, as far as they call the cosmic mandora, that's what they say. And the hands, basically the dominant hand is on top and the bottom hand is at the bottom. Sit up straight, right posture. You close your eyes and then you focus on the breath and you count from 1 to 10. As the breath going in, make sure you're aware of it as it's going in. As the breath is going out, make sure you're aware of that. Sometimes your mind's gonna wander off different places, different things. Don't worry about it. Just be persistent, keep it up.
TM is something that we do in our mind. It's something that we do sitting comfortably with our eyes closed. And we do it for 20 minutes in the morning, soon after we get up. And then we go about our day's activity as normal. And then again we have a second period of meditation, typically in the late afternoon, early evening, before we have our evening meal. And this alternation of rest and activity is bringing about the changes. What we're meditating for is the results in activity, because we live those 23 other hours of the day and we have so many desires and responsibilities and things that we want to accomplish, and we use this 20 minutes as preparation for that activity. And the integration of the experience of TM into our daily life is what we're aiming towards.
It became clear to me that the benefit was so valuable, and that's always been my problem, is fitting things in. I am so busy, and I'm always late, and I'm not trying to fit things in constantly. I won't miss a session at this point. I see no time in the future that I would stop because of the benefit.
It's a fairly important part of my life. I try and do it every day, at least, a little bit. The good thing with meditation is there's formal meditation, which is sort of like going to the gym. So, there are days when you're going to the gym, and there are days you want to go to the gym where you can't go to the gym, just like there's days I want to sit and have a nice, formal, quiet session. But just because you don't go to the gym doesn't mean you're not using your body and not learning the lessons you learn in the gym and the skills you learn in the gym. So there's always like a moment where you can catch yourself, calm yourself down, come back to the moment, and that's something I use every day.
None of the practitioners I spoke with ever recounted to me any adverse effects they attributed to meditation. But in line with the commonly held view that there is no human activity completely beneficial to every being in every circumstance, there are reports that in some people, depersonalization or an unpleasant alteration in the perception or experience of the self can occur. This phenomenon is also characterized by being an outsider observing one's own mental processes. Although this phenomenon is rare, it has been observed in presumably healthy meditators. Citing various case studies, editors Shapiro and Walsh state that in addition to some diagnosed with certain mental illnesses, there is a subgroup of people for whom meditation will be harmful. They also came across a report concluding that for some, prolonged meditation could lead to some undesirable effects. In a recent report published for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, researchers have concluded that because of the poor methodological quality of current evidence, no firm conclusions on the effects of meditation practices in healthcare can be drawn. After analyzing over 800 studies focusing on the effects of meditation on problems like substance abuse, heart disease, and hypertension, researchers have characterized available evidence as, quote, characterized by poor methodological quality and lacking a common theoretical perspective. Nevertheless, I can personally and definitively say I've experienced only positive results from meditating. In addition to being more in touch with my emotions, I also seem to notice details more. Whether it's something trivial like seeing a new landmark I've passed by every day but never really noticed before, or being more in tune and concerned with what people close to me are feeling without them having to verbalize it. And even though it sounds cliche, I've also realized the importance of appreciating the small things in life more, letting go of past mistakes and not worrying so much about the future. I think if you handle the here and now as best you can, then the future will fall into place. There's obviously only so much you can control anyway. I think meditation has also helped me to trust my instincts and believe in myself even more. I don't necessarily consider myself very religious, but more spiritual. So meditating's helped me become more in tune with my spirituality, to help me navigate the difficult times we all go through, continue to progress, and overall just stay positive, even when that's a challenge. I'll definitely continue to meditate and take the lesson of remembering to stop and breathe when a stressful situation arises. I've also recommended the practice to a couple of close family members and friends, That's why it seems evident to me that the overwhelming encouraging scientific data and personal stories from those who practice have most likely signaled the continued rise in the popularity, mainstreaming, and implementation of meditative practices here in our culture.
My mother and I have always talked about opening a meditation center, kind of just a holistic space, become a lot like the ARE, having the library there for people to come in and study different things. I mean, it can be any religion you want, it could be meditation training, it could be learning about yoga, but learning about a lot of the different things going on in the world. I did a lot of just personal therapy, just using meditation rather than having to go through talk therapy. And that's just becoming okay with yourself. And a lot more people a lot of people aren't too happy about being quiet with themselves. They aren't used to that. It takes a long time to be okay with it being silent.
My own interest now is expanding towards looking at the benefits of TM for post-traumatic stress disorder. It's become such a serious problem with the returning soldiers, and that is a debilitating disorder. I just feel very strongly that this is an area where we can really make a difference, because conventional treatment has not been shown effective. They're looking for creative ways, new and innovative ways. We can really change the lives of these people who are suffering.
To do all types of things, from losing weight to getting rich to overcoming addiction. It's obvious all of us have areas in our lives we'd like to improve, and although it may seem counterintuitive, doing less instead of more may be the key. Now, by less, I don't mean simply vegging out in front of the TV or getting more sleep. In this piece, I'll be learning and sharing my own experiences about discovering why and how calming the mind by meditating is perceived by those in the know as the first step to living a more fulfilling, happy, and healthy life. Meditation is a centuries-old practice. Its origins are commonly associated with Eastern cultures and religions, but no one can say for sure where this form of spiritual, mental, and wellness tradition really began. From an historical and religious perspective, the meditative tradition is primarily viewed as a means of attaining divinity, becoming closer to God. Neoplatonism is the modern word used to describe the philosophy having great influence on Christianity in the 3rd century. Plotinus, an ancient Roman philosopher and founder of Neoplatonism, names 4 elements essential to obtaining godly wisdom. Among them, the development of thought beyond sense perception and the transcendence of thought in the achievement of union. Ignatius Loyola, founder of the Jesuits and author of Spiritual Exercises, describes various meditation techniques similar to Buddhist and Hindu practices. For example, picking a specific image, such as the resurrection, and relating each of the senses to that image. Whether we consider ourselves religious or spiritual or not, we all want and need peace of mind, escape from the rigors and stress of everyday life. According to statistics from the American Psychological Association, 1/3 of Americans live with extreme stress. Almost half say their stress has risen over the past few years, and that stress has a negative impact on them at home and at work. From our interpersonal relationships to our health, chronic stress is a major problem. Recent studies suggest that most illnesses are stress-related. Stress triggers an alarm in the brain, telling the body to prepare to defend itself. The nervous system springs into action and various hormones are released so that the senses are sharpened, the heart beats faster, breathing is deeper, and muscles are more tense. Although this fight or flight response is innate, when the body is kept in a constant state of alert because the stress is ever present, that daily grind in our biological systems takes its toll, resulting in fatigue and the breakdown of our immune systems, and thus our overall health. Dr. Serena Groswald has studied extensively the effects of regular meditation on children diagnosed with ADHD. She describes the role stress plays in negatively influencing their behavior.
The prefrontal cortex, which is that part of the brain that is sort of our filter that keeps us from acting from the more primitive part of the brain, which is the emotional part of the brain, that reaction. The prefrontal cortex filters that, and it's analysis and planning, and so that part of the brain that says, you know, maybe I shouldn't hit this person just because they said something I didn't like, that's not function.
In Judaism, it is believed that meditation is required to truly understand the Torah, and that this meditation inspired works such as the Talmud. In the 13th century, Abraham Abulafia, a Jewish mystic and forefather of prophetic Kabbalism, created a method of meditation based on combining letters of the Hebrew alphabet in a manner designed to obtain prophecy by disengaging one's senses from the images and perceptions associated with everyday life. Sufism, an 8th century Islamic offshoot of strict Muslim orthodoxy, stressed the importance of meditation, employing techniques such as breath control and repetition of sacred phrases in order to achieve fana, a closer bond with God. Although the practice of meditation is deeply rooted in religious tradition, today, especially in Western culture, meditation is simply a vehicle to promote overall health, productivity, and positive social change. Of the numerous meditation techniques in practice today, one of the most popular forms in the West and highly researched worldwide is transcendental meditation, brought to the U.S. from India in the late 1950s by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi.
On average, a person has between 14 and 15,000 thoughts a day. And if you multiply that out over a week, a month, a year, it just becomes an incredible amount of thoughts coming into our mind all the time. The amount of thoughts we have would kind of postulate then that something that's giving rise to these thoughts must be pretty huge itself. And some characteristics of thought are that it has intelligence and it has energy. Every time we have a thought, it has some intelligence because it guides our activity. We make plans based on our thinking. Every thought has energy and intelligence. Therefore, the thing that's giving rise to these thoughts must also contain energy and intelligence. And similarly, since there's so many of these things that pop into our mind, it must be an infinite reservoir of intelligence and energy deep within our mind that's giving rise to thoughts all the time. And what we do in transcendental meditation is we allow our active conscious mind to move from these superficial, I say superficial, but active thinking level to sequentially deeper, more settled, quieter levels of thinking until the mind transcends. The word transcend means to go beyond, and meditation in the broadest sense means thinking. So transcendental meditation is about going beyond thought. And when the mind transcends, it experiences that source that's giving rise to impulses of thought, this infinite reservoir of energy and intelligence deep within the mind. So when the mind makes contact with this, it enlivens it. It enlivens it in our mind and in our body. Like a sponge sitting in a saucer of water absorbs the water into the sponge. In meditation, we dive within, we allow the mind to experience these more subtle states of functioning, more deeper levels of consciousness, so that it can understand how it functions and how life functions as a whole.
Diving deep within. The key phrase here with regard to meditation and primary goal of the practice. You may have heard the familiar phrases, mind over matter, the mind is a terrible thing to waste, and that scientists say we really only use about 10% of our brains. Well, if that's the case, if we learn to train our minds to employ more than that 10%, could the most complex organ in our bodies be a tool to help us improve our lives? My name is Kelsey McCall. I first became interested in learning more about the power of the mind after seeing a special on cable TV about Shaolin monks and other people with seemingly superhuman strengths and their ability to easily endure untold amounts of pain and discomfort that the average person would find unbearable. Like a man who trained his mind to regulate his body temperature to withstand simulated hypothermic conditions and then be perfectly fine afterward. Or the monk who never flinched while bricks and nails punished his body. It's not that I'm some type of sadist or anything, but the fact that we as humans are capable of pushing the limits of what we normally perceive as possible truly fascinates me. And then I started to think about people who seem to have the most reason to be mad at the world and be pessimistic, whether they're hungry or sick or living in third world countries without the luxuries we take for granted, and those who are victims of crime or whatever the circumstances. Whenever you hear their stories of survival, they usually always have one thing in common, and it's that they use their brain to always think positively and keep an optimistic outlook. And so when I delved into the topic of learning to unlock our mind's potential, I came across numerous books about how to use the power of the mind